Hi, everyone. We are at the top of the hour. We're still missing a few people, but because we only have an hour or we're a little cramped for time, we're going to head and get started. So I want to welcome you all to our webinar on reverse dieting. We're excited you could all attend on this Sunday. I am Brandy. I'm one of the coaches at Center Stage for those of you who don't know me. I know a lot of you on here. I know Tina. So we're going to get started in a roundtable format. So thank you to everybody who submitted questions ahead of time. We'll address all those. As we go, you can also type your questions into the chat window. I'll be monitoring those. So go ahead and type those in. Due to time, we're not going to have people pipe up on questions, speak up on questions, because it can just get too time consuming. So any questions you have, put them in chat. I'll be watching those. And also just to control the noise, I'm asking everybody to turn off your mic and leave your mic muted throughout the webinar today. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tina and Allison for quick intros, and then we'll launch right into the substance. So with that said, Tina, quick intro.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Tina. I'm the owner and coach with Center Stage Figures and Physiques. So competition prep coach, posing coach. I've been doing this. I won't go into the full resume. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and super excited to team up with Allison. And, you know, Brandy's been my partner in crime for a long time, but so that we can get some information out to you guys on reverse dieting, whatever you want to call it, whether it's competition or you've been chronically dieting your whole life, or yo-yo dieting, or anytime you've been in a calorie deficit and you kind of don't want to be there forever, because you shouldn't be. And so we're going to address all of that today, so that you don't feel quite as lost. And I'll tell you up front, Allison will probably agree, that you may get a lot of "it depends" on the client questions. But so be prepared for that, because it's going to be hard to give really specifics, because it really is client specific, but you will at least get some guidelines and some general information about how the process works, I think, rather than be able to tell you, oh, you should increase your calories by exactly this much, right? Because I think it really does depend. But I'll let Allison, if she agrees or disagrees. And the cool thing is that we may not have the exact same opinions, but you'll get to hear two professionals and different opinions on things. I have a feeling we're probably going to agree on most stuff, but over to you, Allison.
Yeah, no, thanks for plugging that. But I completely agree with you on the fact that it all depends on the context, and it depends on the individual. And you know, I work a lot with non-competitors as well, and I have to say, it's, you know, as bodybuilders and physique athletes, we call it reverse dieting, but really it's the ability to maintain your weight and not have a significant, horrible rebound after the diet's over. It's basically like people look at dieting and they never stop to think about what's going to happen after the diet, right? So this is my goal weight, and once I hit that goal weight, or I'm going to get on stage, and once I get on stage, you know, then what, right? Then what happens? And I know I've been in the sport a long time. I know Tina has as well. And, you know, when I started, that nobody said anything about it, right? You were just like left to your own devices after the competition. And, you know, I'm sure we'll get into some individual stories, but, you know, I had a couple of bad rebounds. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk to you guys about this today. But yeah, so my name is Allie. Hopefully most of you know who I am by now. I own AFS Training, Allie Fitness Systems. I've been an online coach for 12 years now, competitive athlete. So looking forward to talking to everybody and hopefully getting some good feedback and dialogue going. I think it's great. This is all women. I work with men and women. I know Tina works mostly with women, but I can honestly say that the process of reverse dieting is entirely different for women than it is for men. And if you think that it's the same or that it should be the same, it's not the same. So I'm really glad that this is all women, and we're going to be addressing this in this kind of format.
Awesome.
All right, thank you. So that's the intros on those. On those guys, we'll be answering your questions. So let's just launch right into the substance of it. And Allison, I'll start with you since I already have you on the mic. You sort of covered the definition of reverse dieting. So I think we all have an idea of what we're talking about. They were talking about the same thing.
Right.
But if you could really boil it down into one or two key principles or definitional elements of a reverse diet so that everybody could understand it at a layman's level, how would you put that?
So The easiest way to explain a reverse diet is it's a diet upside down, right? It's when you think about a caloric deficit down into your weight goal, you have to go back out of that deficit. So that's like the easiest way that I like to try to explain it. It's a diet like flipped on its head. Just like how when you diet down, you gradually reduce calories until you get to where you want to go. A reverse diet is the opposite, right? You're going to gradually increase calories until you get to where you want to go. It's like the most basic way to kind of explain it. People have this misconception that the metabolism, breaks or gets injured or something really bad and damaging happens to it by the process of being in a caloric deficit. And that's not really the case. What you have to understand is that your metabolism makes adaptations, or your body makes some physiological adjustments to try to fight you on the weight loss a little bit. And what a reverse diet does is helps alleviate those negative metabolic adaptations. It's the process of elevating your metabolism, healing your metabolism, letting your body balance, getting your hormones back to where they need to be. All of the things that happen when you diet, you have to kind of make unhappen out of the reverse diet.
Good.
Minus the weight gain, right? So
well,
yeah. So but depending,
we'll address that, I'm sure. But minus the I always tell people it's minus the excessive fat gain.
Right. That's what it is.
Let's be specific here, because weight gain can come from a lot of things. What I tell people when I reverse diet my own clients, I watch a lot more photo progress than I do scale progress, because I'm looking for visual signs of adipose tissue accumulation. Like all of a sudden we're getting like love handles coming over the pants, and I'm sure we'll talk about all this in the questions, but your weight is going to go up. Mm-hmm. And the key is to, one, not panic, which I'm sure we'll talk about too, but two, to make sure that it's not, that it's non-tissue weight, right? It's water, it's full glycogen stores, it's some sodium, it's stomach volume, right? You're eating more food, there's more food in your stomach. Hopefully a little bit of muscle, and we're just minimizing fat gains. We're minimizing gaining excess fat.
All right, so Tina, building on that, Allison talked about what it is. We got a question that said, I've been told in the past that 150 calories a week is basically the number to do the reverse. Is there a specific number? What's your thoughts on the 150? In a nutshell, how generically do people reverse diet?
Well, I think, all right, so the 150, I'm assuming somebody, maybe a coach gave her that number that would be maybe appropriate for her based on how long she's been dieting, how severely she's been dieting. And I really hate to kick off like every question like that with, it depends on the client, but it really does. I could give an example of a client that just came off stage, and her calories went up 400 in her first week. So it also depends, I think, on where you are in your reverse diet, right? So I think if you're talking about a competitor who's just coming off of weeks and weeks and weeks of extremely severe dieting, because a lot of competitors go very low in an effort to get to these, severe body fat levels, you may want to get the calories up quicker to begin the recovery process quicker. But again, it depends on how low the client's calories had gotten and for how long, really how much they may be suffering in the sense of their hormonal balance, how they feel physically, their sleep, and all of those things. So to say 150, if that's right or wrong, I think that sounds like a fairly, I don't want to say generic, it sounds like a fairly low chance of rebounding very quickly type of calorie range, I guess, if to put it in that sense. So it's a matter of like how, it's going to be hard to say one way or the other. I think that would be an easy way to not rebound very quickly, but I don't know if it's the most efficient way to do it, because I think that would be very client specific.
Allison, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, like with anything in fitness, and ironically, I posted about this today on Facebook, but we always like these hard and fast rules. Like, how many calories should I cut a day to lose fat? How much fat should I eat a day? How much weight how many calories should I add after my reverse diet? Well, it does depend. Like, I know that it sounds redundant, but a good coach is going to say it depends. It's all within the context. So, if you've just dieted and you're looking at coming out of the deficit or something, the first thing I think you have to do is look at what you were doing. That's kind of where you have to come from, right? Because somebody who was on 1,500 calories a day is in a totally different place than somebody who was on 800 calories a day. And as much as you would like to say, somebody who's on 800 calories a day, let's just get them right back up to maintenance. If you've been on 800 calories a day for several weeks and you've been doing a lot of cardio and you take your calories up way too fast, I'm telling you, you're going to balloon. And here's where I say it's different for men and women. Men don't mind the balloon, okay? Most men are like beyond thrilled to see the scale go up. They're like throwing confetti. Women are having a meltdown. We're totally having a meltdown. We're looking at the scale, we're crying. We're bloated. We can't fit in our pants. And I know that a lot of people will fight me on this, but whenever I reverse a woman, I am always paying attention to the psychology, and I am trying to not push her too hard, too fast, to the point where she becomes so mentally uncomfortable with the process that she can't stick with it.
Right.
So if you're again, back to this whole 150 calorie thing, look at where you were, look at what you were eating. How long were you eating that, right? Were you on 800 calories for several weeks? And then looking forward, you also have to think about, am I going to have a major meltdown if this scale goes through the roof? And if the answer is yes, then I will say err on the side of caution and make those caloric increases slow.
Right.
Take it slow. If you feel like you are really dying and you have got to get some food in you and you don't give two flying flips if the scale goes up, then make a bigger caloric jump. It really, for me, it boils down to what I know about the client's psychology and how they're going to handle it, because I've already reversed women too fast and had them panic and cut calories on their own, or not stick to their reverse diet, or they just fly off the handle and start binging. And so you really have to take the mental aspect of it into consideration as well.
And finding a good balance of that, right? And knowing how aggressive your client is willing to go. I have some clients that are willing to be aggressive, and they're like, bring it on. I want to build. I don't care. I'll put on the weight. It doesn't matter. And we can be aggressive, and we can start feeding them and get them recovered much quickly, because there's an element of being able to recover, because we'll get into talking about growth, I think, beyond that too, right? So you have to get into a caloric excess to be able to get into that growth phase. But sometimes you have to do a little bit of recovery, some regrowth, and then some growth. So you have to, judge where the client is. And I'm exactly where Allison is in judging based on what my client can handle mentally and emotionally. And we may go a little harder out of the gate and then slow down, or we may do that vice versa. It just depends on, because you just have to kind of measure how fragile somebody is and how they're going to be able to handle that.
Right. Yeah. So I would say, like with the 150 calorie question, right, you need to look at where you were and then figure out a general idea of what your maintenance should be, and then take the psychology into consideration and kind of pick a caloric target to increase based on that.
Well, and then I think to add to that, on what you have to figure out what your new maintenance is, because what my maintenance was before I ever started cutting for a show is not what my new maintenance is. So I don't want to jump back up to 2,500 calories a day from 1,200, because my new maintenance might be around 1,700 right now, and then I have to build from there. So So
all right. So yes. So feeding off of that point, people who might be new to this, perhaps haven't done it before, or just trying to get educated, or might be working alone, in general terms, is there a period of time that the average person might consider themselves in reverse dieting before they go onto a building or something like that? you have a, not even recommended, but is there an average amount of time that a reverse diet happens?
Do you want to start, Allison? I started the last one. Go ahead.
Sure. I would say, ugh. I generally think of the, like, if it goes on how long you were dieting for, right? So did you cut really hard for 12 weeks or did you diet really hard for 6 months? So again, it goes back to what you were doing. I tend to think the period you require to come out of that should at least be about half of that, somewhere in and around that range. And again, I like to see, it also, of course, depends on what the client is trying to do, right? So we're trying to minimize fat gains. We're not trying to necessarily focus so much on weight gain, but I don't like to see people balloon up. Okay, if you gain 10 pounds in 2 weeks, it ain't muscle, sweetheart. I don't care why you want to like tell yourself. Nobody gains 10 pounds of muscle. I mean, you would be a genetic freak of nature or on the best side, like cycle of drugs to be gaining 10 pounds in 2 weeks. So you want to see weight go up slowly. And then eventually I would like to see it reach a point of maintenance and maintain that weight for a period healthfully at a good level of calories and then build from there. So there's no set time frame, but I like to see people always see nutrition in terms of cutting or massing. But maintenance is this like unsexy topic that's not like never talked about, and it is so crucial. Like it is just so crucial. You have to give yourself time to just kind of cruise control. Just think of it as driving a car and you're just letting off the gas a little bit and you're just kind of like, on cruise control and you're maintaining your weight. And I like to see people do that for a period. If they dieted really hard for 16 weeks, I'd like to see them do it for at least 8. And then we can talk about massing or something like that. Then we can talk about caloric surpluses versus, just maintenance. But if you move into, say, a gaining phase or a caloric surplus phase too quickly, again, you're going to go back to that weight is just going to go through the roof. So it all has to kind of happen in phases. It builds on top of each other.
Yeah, and I would say, I think to add to that, again, I don't think, there is a hard and fast of like, what's the average time. So for me, and if this is somebody doing this on their own, how they might be able to judge this themselves, right? Look at, if you lost your cycle, have you gotten your cycle back? What's your energy in the gym? What are your how do you feel hunger wise? How do you feel energy wise? How do you feel strength wise?
Yeah.
How do you feel, has your sleep gotten better? Because these are all the things that, all these things kind of go, haywire when you diet for a long period of time. And so, if I have a client that's not starving to death and wanting to eat everything in sight and their energy is good in the gym and they're, and they've kind of gotten the hormones recalibrated, because the hormones, all of them, our hunger hormones, our sex hormones, all of those things go kaplooey. So if I feel like I've gotten them to a place where these things are sort of back to at least kind of status quo, that's when I realized we might be at a good maintenance place, right? And then, like Allison said, I would agree, like staying maintenance for, a long-ish period of time. So, kind of cruise control for a while and then look at starting to add calories back up again. So.
Okay. So again, on that point, Tina, obviously cardio and training is a major impact into your caloric deficit. So when you're reversing back out, how do you manage the cardio and training piece of that to match the nutrition?
So I reverse cardio the same way that I reverse with calories, right? So just like Allison was saying before, when you're dieting, calories are coming down, down, down. Sometimes cardio is going up, 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 while calories are coming down, down, down. And so when you're reversing, you're flipping that on its head. So you can't go and add all these calories back in and then just cut all your cardio, especially if all you did was like 2 times 10 minutes of HIIT cardio and you were some genetic freak and that's all you had to do, that's great. But if you were doing an hour of cardio 7 days a week and you decide you're just not going to do cardio anymore, even if you're being conservative on your calories, you're probably going to balloon up fairly quickly. So you have to reverse that out the same way. So for me, again, it depends on how much cardio the client was doing beforehand, but I usually try to cut it in half fairly quickly and then slowly reduce it from there. But again, it kind of depends on where the client was before we started the reverse.
Yeah, so the first thing, I'm very similar with Tina. I back clients out of excessive cardio the same way I back them down in. However, the first thing I do is I change their cardio type.
Oh,
so
yeah, I do that too.
The first thing I try to do is get the client off of HIIT or high intensity cardio. I try to do that as quickly as possible because particularly with women, HIIT cardio produces a very strong cortisol release. So women tend to have a much more negative hormonal response to high intensity interval training than men do. So cortisol is usually circulating regardless coming off of a prep for like a variety of reasons. So the very first thing I try to do is shift those sessions or reduce those sessions or change it. Like if they were doing 15 minutes of HIIT, I'm just going to make it like 20 minutes of walking, like low intensity, like nothing. And when I say walking, I mean go for a walk. I don't mean like up to, treadmill kind of thing, like just go for an easy walk. So the first thing I do is try to get rid of the HIIT, switch to like lower intensity interval training. And then from there, I just pare it down by minutes per day, right? We just chip away at and it can be small intervals, right? Maybe just reduce it by 3 to 5 minutes a day and just pick it down from there. I usually do that versus just taking whole sessions out. I know some trainers will do that. Like if they have their client doing cardio for 7 days a week, they'll only have them do it for 5. I don't do that. I chip away and pull little minutes because it's just an easier, more subtle way to coax the body down versus just these drastic session cuts.
And sometimes I'll even have clients, if they just need kind of the mental break from cardio, right? If you want to go take a Zumba class, go take a Zumba class, right? Like if you want to go do a spin class and you haven't been able to, go do a spin class, go do
yoga, something.
Go do something that's not cardio on an elliptical for 30 minutes or whatever it is, right? So go do something fun. I have clients that decide they want to go run a marathon. I don't get that. I know Allison and Brandy, they get that stuff. I don't, because running's not a thing as far as I'm concerned. But, if that's what they want to do, that's fine, right? So
running is fun.
Running is not fun.
That's what my husband says. My husband's like, the only way I run is if someone's chasing me.
Right. Okay. Anyway, so hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so Allison, one of the questions we received, obviously we've been talking about nutrition and fitness and all of the science behind this. It's all awesome on paper, but the reality is there's an enormous mental component for women who are trying to reverse. Can you talk about the mental component and talk about the strategies you use with your clients?
Oh, I can talk about the mental component from being a coach, and I can talk about it from me personally because it is one of the things that I, in the past, have struggled with the most. As soon as my weight starts getting up above what I have in my head is this number of comfort, I would panic and try to pull calories down or take cardio up to get my weight to go back down. Because for whatever reason, and my clients will think I don't understand when I tell them not to be concerned about the scale, but I do. I do understand. I know what it feels like to have that scale go up, and it is like ruining your freaking day. It is just like killing you to see the scale go up. So there is this mental component, but you really have to coach yourself through it, talk yourself through it, remind yourself that your contest body or your extra lean body or this super shredded version of yourself is not something that you are going to be able to maintain forever. And that if you want to healthfully maintain within a couple of pounds of where you are, like say you didn't do a contest, say you just lost a lot of weight and you want to be able to lock it in and you want to be able to healthfully embrace, you have to eat more. You can't just continue to eat like a bird for the rest of your life. It's not sustainable. So I usually tell people that they have to really, a lot of self-talk, a lot of mental reminders. I also tell people to pay attention to how they look and how they feel, not just get so hung up on the scale. Start embracing feeling stronger, feeling more energy, right? I don't feel exhausted going to play with my dogs, or you don't feel exhausted going to play with your kids. You know, just my hair is not feeling dry. Like, I'm not cranky all the time. I don't constantly want to like bite everybody's head off. Like, start embracing the beautiful aspects of having a more balanced, healthy body versus just being chronically exhausted, you know, all the time. I always tell people to focus on that.
And I think to add to that, just kind of like the mental strategy, because that's, I 100% agree with everything Allison just said. But realizing ahead of time, so this is that self-coaching that, I mean, obviously if you have a coach, will help you through that too, but you've got to put this into practice every day when you if you step on the scale and you let it sort of, you know, take control of your life in that way. You have to realize that your focus has been losing weight for this long period of time. And it's going to take you a while to adjust your brain and how you see and how you know, to let your brain adjust to a new focus, right? To something different, because you've been focused on this downward thing, right? Of your weight. And now you have to give your brain just as much time to sort of reverse its thinking. And it takes a while. And I'm reverse dieting right now. And I can agree with Allison, the fact that it is hard even for the coaches. And I know my weight has to go back up, but I don't like it. I do not like seeing the number on the scale, but every time I get on it, I tell myself, this is part of the process, Tina. This is what you're supposed to do. And I have to coach myself through it. It doesn't make it any easier because we're coaches and we know better. So just like with anything else, you have to put it into practice, and you have to coach yourself through it so that you understand mentally what needs to be happening physically, and then focusing on all those positive things, like Allison said, like, you know, how strong you are and how much friendlier you are. And now you can go out with your friends and your family again, and, you know, all of these things, and kind of get back to enjoying life.
And I think just real quick, the other important thing to remember is to always keep the big picture in mind. And I specifically always say this to my clients who aren't competitive, or who, you know, haven't done any kind of contest prep or anything like that. They've maybe just lost a lot of weight. You cannot continue to eat in a caloric deficit, an extreme caloric deficit, indefinitely, because long term, there are ramifications that are going to make weight loss and weight maintenance harder. You have to see diet, again, these periods of aggressively cutting calories and then increasing calories and then a surplus and then we cut again. You have to see these fluctuations and evolutions in caloric intake as all part of the process. Because if you just continue to eat in a deficit forever, if you lose weight and you reach this, you know, this new body weight and you're in love with it, and then you are told you have to take your calories up and you're having like this mental issue with it, I'm telling you, if you don't take your calories up, you are not going to be able to maintain that new weight. You have to take calories up in order to maintain your own weight. I know that it sounds completely like counterintuitive, but if you just continue to eat in a deficit, your metabolism is just going to continue to slow. And then all of a sudden you're going to realize you're gaining weight and you haven't even done anything different. You're going to be like, what in the hell? You know, I was like, you know, 120 for months and months and months, and now I'm not anymore, but I didn't change my diet. So what do? You cut calories again, and the cycle just perpetuates itself until, one, you either are starved to death and you're off binging in the weeds, which is what happens to most people because you just can't hang, you know. And so you have to be strategic and keep the big picture in mind. And so when I work with clients who don't do contest preps and who are just looking to maintain their new weight, I always tell them, you have to think big. Think big picture. Think long term. Think this is a lifestyle. Think I just lost 25 pounds and I am never going to gain it again. And the way to never gain it again is to start to eat a little bit more.
Right.
So point blank on that question, Allison, can you break your metabolism? Can you literally just break it? Can you talk about that, or that rumor?
No, you know.
I'm broken.
It's just broken.
I'm just so broken.
So I hate that term for so many reasons. One, because people will use it as an excuse. Two, because it's a misnomer, right? The metabolism is basically what your body does with incoming calories. So if you think about that from a logical standpoint, it can't break.
Unless you're dead.
Right. When you say people have fast metabolisms or slow metabolisms, you're talking about the person who can sit down and eat a vat of pasta and not gain a pound, or the person who just looks at a carb and balloons up. So we're talking about people who have different metabolic rates, but their metabolisms are still working.
Mm-hmm.
They don't break. They don't just like cease. So no, the metabolism doesn't break. The metabolism changes, and it speeds up and it slows down, and the body makes adjustments and adaptations to your metabolism in response to the choices that you make, in response to the life you live, in response to your sleep, in response to stress, and in response to diet or training. But so no, the short answer to that is it doesn't break. It speeds up,
adapts.
it slows down, it adapts, but you're never broken. I don't like that concept that somebody is broken. You're not broken, unfixable. Your metabolism doesn't not work. It just might not be as efficient as you would prefer it to be. And there's a huge difference.
Good points. I don't even have anything to add to that.
Well,
it's not broken, it's adapted.
Yeah, it's adjusted.
It'll adapt high and low, right? Like you can,
Right.
I guess you could, I don't like to say it's broken, but you can fix it. You can make it more efficient. You can make it faster. You can make it slower. And it's just a matter of choice of what direction you want to go in. But your metabolism will adapt because why? Our bodies are designed to survive. Our bodies are not designed to look good. Our bodies do not actually give a shit what we look like. Our bodies want to, make sure that we can maintain all of our processes and continue on the face of the planet. And so it will adjust. That's why people in Africa, while they do die from actual starvation, you have people that are living on like maybe 100 calories a day if they're lucky, and they're not dead. So they're not broken, but their metabolisms have adjusted to their environment and their caloric intake, and they manage to keep their bodies alive as long as they're able to do that. But no, and we're not in starvation mode either. I don't like the term starvation mode any more than broken metabolism.
Okay, so now that we did some debunking, Tina, you mentioned that you're actually doing a reverse on yourself right now. So to give people an idea, can you just talk about what you're doing step by step as an example of a possible reverse program?
So I may not be the best example, but I can give myself an example. So first of all, I will back to Allison's point about maintaining for a period of time. Many of you know I competed for a number of years, 7, 8 years at some point. I retired in 2012. And I had been chronically dieting and rebounding post-show because there was no reverse dieting all the time that I was competing. So it took me 6 years. I haven't cut calories in 6 years. So I literally I repaired my metabolism, or I made my metabolism a little bit more efficient by increasing my calories over, my first couple years off stage. And then I maintained for a really long period of time. And I decided I wanted to cut for my 45th birthday, as some of you know. Anyway, long story short, my cut actually went easier than any calorie deficit fat loss phase I'd ever done in my entire life, probably because I sat on cruise control for a really long period of time, and my body was like, hey, yeah, all right, let's do this. Because the longer you go in between diets, I think, and the as long as you're doing the right things in between those diets with the maintenance calories and not doing too much cardio and all of those things that we just talked about, the easier or the more willing your body is, I think, to do the things you want it to do when you go to cut again. So I cut from October until May. Yeah, April, May. And then I got my calories down, I guess, around 1,500. I think it was about the lowest I got on average. I can't say how much cardio I was doing because I don't really train like the average person, but basically what I started doing right away, because I track exactly what my calories are, and I started adding 200 to 300 calories in a week for myself. I tried to back off of training. Unfortunately, my body told me I was going to back off of training completely. So I haven't been doing anything. And because I can't do anything right now, I'm actually backing a little bit down on my calories from what I had planned to do because I can't train at all right now. So for myself, because I never really got super, super low in calories or super high in cardio, I'm just adding a couple hundred calories a week for myself so that I can bring myself back up slowly. So that's what I'm doing for myself specifically. Like I said, I have my client, Angel, who just hit her reverse diet this week. Her calories had gotten down around 1,200 because that's how we had to get aggressive towards the end. She wasn't that way for a really long period of time. We had refeeds in there throughout her prep. And her first week back on the reverse, we brought her up to around 1,600 because I knew based on refeeds and things that we had been doing that her body could handle that. That might be too aggressive for somebody else, but I knew that she'd be able to do it. Of course, she questioned it immediately. Oh my God, I don't want to gain too much fat too fast. So, are you sure? Because 400 calories, but, and I'm going to monitor it. And if I do feel like just same way for myself or for a client, I'm going to monitor what I'm looking like, how I'm feeling. And if I feel like it's too aggressive too quickly, I'm not going to necessarily back down because I don't want to go back and reverse. I don't want to go 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. We're just going to kind of hold and see how the body levels off, because sometimes it just takes a minute for the body to kind of go, okay, right? Like I like this is good. And then we can kind of go back from there. But I don't like to get calories up and then freak out and then go back down. So we just have to, kind of level out there for a minute. So that's what I'm doing, and equally kind of doing for clients that are reversing right now as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So on that piece, Allison, I know you're not probably doing a reverse, but you do a lot of reverses with clients. If you had one piece of advice or I hate to say the word mistake, but one point that you would like to press the most on people on reverse dieting, what would it be? The mistake you see the most?
Comparing their reverse diet to somebody else's, thinking that it has to look like somebody else's, thinking that they need to gain X amount of pounds in X amount of time, or eat X amount of calories in X amount of time, or again, thinking that there are these hard and fast rules, and there just aren't. And it's like any other component of dieting. I do it myself when I reverse diet after a show, and I tell my clients as well, stay the heck off of social media if you need to. Don't look at who else is gaining weight at what rate and who else is eating what and how many carbohydrates they're getting a day. Focus on doing what you need to do. I think the biggest mistake I see people make is focusing more on comparing what they're doing to what somebody else is doing than just focusing and tunnel visioning on executing their process the best way that they can.
And I would say the biggest mistake I see people make is not reverse dieting. Whether it's going full-blown binge or staying on their very low calories for a long period of time. And unfortunately, I mostly see the binge, then you restrict again, and we get into binge and restrict. And, and I think some people think that because they already did the binge that they're even more broken and, there's no hope and they just keep binging, or, whatever the case may be. So if you do go off the rails, and lots of us do, right?
The worst thing you can do, though, I'm not trying to interrupt, but I am interrupting.
But you are.
I am, I know. But the worst thing you can do if you do go off the rails is panic and go right back into like what you were doing, because, and now I am speaking to the competitors, right? We think that it's not, but extreme dieting down into a show and binging afterwards is one big fat yo-yo diet. Mm-hmm. All right. It's one big fat yo-yo diet. We don't think of it that way because we think we're owed all this food because we dieted for this certain period of time, right? I dieted for so long, I can have what I want. It's a big yo-yo diet. And science has shown that the number one reason we are such an overweight society and such a society with piss poor weight management is because we yo-yo diet.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we diet really hard and then we go right back to doing what we were doing and the weight comes back. And then we diet really hard and then we go right back to doing what we're doing and the weight comes back. And literally you can say it's not, but contest prep and then binging is the same damn thing.
Exactly. It really is. It's the exact same thing. And
One big fat yo-yo diet.
And if I have a client that does accidentally go off the rails, because even the best laid plans with the best coaches, it happens, right? And so I'm like, you know what? We'll call that a quick recovery diet, and now we have your calories here. So let's go from where we are, right? Let's not try to look backwards. We can't undo what was just done because you just went off the rails for a week. So now let's take inventory of where we are. Let's let the body kind of level out for a minute. No, we're not going to increase your cardio. No, we're not going to go back down to your peak week plan, because I have clients coming to me all the time telling me that that's what they're going to do. And no, that's not what we're going to do. Right. So, or former clients, however, I saw you shaking your head, Brandy, former clients, whatever it is. But no, so we have to kind of take inventory. You have to brush it off. We have to figure out what went wrong. Like, why did you go off the rails? What, was it a hormonal thing, an emotional thing? Do we have contest blues going on? Is it a peer pressure from friends and family, or because you're watching somebody on social media with all the food pictures and, and everything else? And, a big indicator for me that somebody is potentially going to go off the rails even before it happens, is anybody who wants to take some time off to enjoy their life after the show, or anybody who is already stockpiling all the ice cream and the candy and the cookies and the everything else. They have their cabinets full of Girl Scout cookies because they missed out on them, and all the Easter candy they saved from Easter, and all the Halloween candy they saved from Halloween when they did fall shows. And so when I see those things happening even before the end of a diet, competition or otherwise, then I have to make sure that we're sort of having this big conversation about how that's just setting them up. They're literally preparing for a binge, and that in and of itself kind of trying to get out and ahead of those things. The other thing too, I think, that goes along with that are people who schedule vacations the day after or the week after their show, or any time immediately after their show. Going to an all-inclusive resort or on a cruise or on a week's vacation with your family is another number one mistake I see people make. Post-show, hey, it sounds great. You're going to be in great shape. I'm going to go on a cruise because I just came off the stage and I look freaking fantastic. Well, you are literally setting yourself up for the biggest rebound, because there's the strongest people are rarely going to stay on their just a couple of extra 100 calories reverse diet when they're in that type of environment. So I usually try to convince clients not to schedule vacations and things like that immediately post-show. Let's give a good 3-4 weeks or longer, so you're kind of out of that initial really scary moment after the show, that really sort of fragile state where like everything, because your hormones are out of whack, your hunger signals and your satiety hormones, all of those things are not where they are supposed to be. Your body will tell you you're hungry when you're not, when you shouldn't be. Your body will tell you you're not full when it should be telling you you're full. So you're just setting yourself up for potential big failure if you do things like that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so starting to talk about some of the competing things, we did get some questions in from competitors that are pretty specific and technical. One that we got in talks about, and Allison, maybe I'll address this to you. We've talked about how you obviously reverse calories, but how do you deal with macronutrients, reversing those? And as part of that, what if somebody's on some type of unique diet, like they're carb cycling at the end of their prep or something like that? How do you manage all of that coming out of a reverse?
So I'll answer that question backwards, because I carb cycle. I'm a huge fan of carb cycling, and one thing I actually really like to do after a show, because I like my clients to come out of the show with a plan. So because that helps alleviate a lot of the stress. If you have your reverse diet in hand and you know what you're to do after the show, a lot of times it can help give you that same disciplined perspective that you have going into the show. A lot of the problems I see and a lot of the disconnects I see when I see competitors fall off the wagon, it's because their coach didn't really give them anything to do after the show. right? They just get on stage and then they're done. If you're carb cycling and I carb cycle, what I like to do is give myself 2 to 3 days of high carbs. That's like one of the best things I like to do coming out of a show, because I don't feel as much of a need to binge knowing I get all these extra calories. I can still eat like healthy foods. I'm not going to be totally off the wagon. I still have some structure. And I give myself like 2 or 3 days of higher carbs, and that helps alleviate a lot of that stress. It helps, remove some of the desire to just like want to eat everything. And to answer the first part of the question, the macronutrient I usually tend to take up first. And again, this is general. I'm speaking in generalities because it all depends on the context, but I do usually take carbs up first, only because carbohydrates have the most impact on cortisol. They help release the most serotonin, right? There's a reason you call it a carb coma, okay? You eat a lot of carbs and then you take a dirt nap because your body's just like, thank you. So I usually try to take carbohydrates up if I feel the client can handle it, because those usually helps the client, release some more serotonin, helps alleviate cortisol. They just tend to relax. It's just like a big fat sigh of relief. So I usually try to take carbohydrates up first if I can, and I usually advocate trying to take carbohydrates up first. Again, particularly when it comes to women, because our hormones respond more sensitively to carbohydrate deprivation than men do, right? Our thyroid tends to downregulate a little bit more. We have some more negative metabolic adaptations in response to being low carbohydrate. So if you are low carbohydrate, I definitely try to take the carbs up first. Again, within ranges so that your weight's not ballooning, but I usually try to do carbs first.
I would agree. I'd say that same thing with me and my clients. It's usually carbs. They seem to be the thing everybody wants the most anyway. Some just crave fats, but most people want the carbs, right? So, but it makes you feel better. It gives you more of that wiggle room. And a lot of my clients or people who are in calorie deficits, their protein is much higher. Carbohydrates are lower and protein's higher. To make sure that we're preserving as much lean muscle tissue as possible. So sometimes, especially right off the bat, I might drop their if I had them on very high protein and very low carbs, and I might just, to give them more room for the carbs without going way overboard in calories, we'll drop the protein back down a little bit, to keep it within the range of scientific zero 0.8 to like 1.2 grams. So that way I can not raise calories too high, but still give them more of that carbohydrate with a little bit less protein, so they have a little bit more balance there. Then eventually I like to bring the fats up too.
That's a really good point too. If you've been eating an excessively high protein diet, one really easy fix is to pull that down a little bit. I tend to be a carb happy coach, I guess you could call me. I am not somebody who's going to put a client on 300 grams of protein and 100 grams of carbohydrate. You're not going to see that kind of diet from me. I will take protein down to 0.85 to 1 gram per pound of body weight to keep as much carbohydrate in as possible, particularly if it's a natural athlete, because carbohydrates are muscle sparing. So it helps prevent muscle wasting during a prep. So I will try to keep them as high as I can. Bearing in mind that the client is losing weight. But if you're somebody who either put yourself on a really high protein diet or your coach puts you on a really high protein diet, Tina makes a freaking awesome point when she says you can pull protein down a little bit, bring your carbs up, and it's still going to keep your calories relatively even, so you aren't going to feel like you're shoving a ton of food. Because that's the other thing sometimes. Your stomach shrinks when you diet for a really long time. And I do notice sometimes I'll have clients who are just like, oh my God, I feel like I just feel like I'm walking around with a watermelon in my stomach. And a really easy fix is to, like she said, just try to pull some of your calories from another macronutrient down so you can bring the macros that have been in a deficit up.
And then I think along those same lines, so this isn't macros necessarily, but it's your food choices. So, we tend to put all the really healthy foods in while we're dieting. And then even if we're staying in our calorie and macro balance, for some reason I want to fill all my, we want to go from sweet potatoes and rice cakes and all those really good for us things. And now I just want to fill it with like Girl Scout cookies and ice cream and everything else. And you are going to feel different. Even if your carbs are exactly the same, you're not going to feel as good eating the Girl Scout cookies and the ice cream for your carbs versus, the whole nutrient dense foods that you were eating for your carbs pre-contest or while you were dieting or what have you. And we tend to lose all sense of keeping fruits and vegetables and all of those things in because we want to pile all the junk in that we can fit into our macros. And you're going to feel crappier that way. And you're just going to kind of perpetuate the bloat and the, digestive issues and, everything else that goes along with it, even if your calories are the same. So I tend to tell my clients, obviously I want them to have some treats that they can fit in there, but you should still be focusing on those nutrient dense foods to help your body recover from this, caloric deficit, metabolically adapted state that you've been in. You still want to fuel your body with the best possible options.
And and obviously Tina and I coach slightly differently. When I do a macro plan, and I know you said, I think you have food lists too, but I give my clients food lists, and the food lists are not me being anal. They're not me trying to dictate everything that you do. But what they are there for is for me to remind you that this is the priority, nutrient dense whole foods. And so when we come off a contest prep, particularly if the client's been restrictive in terms of food types, I will dictate to them, though. I will say you can have, 2 to 3 flexible dieting options a week, meaning 2 to 3 times a week. You go ahead and you plug in whatever the hell you want on that day. You want pizza that day, you go have your pizza, you make sure it fits your macros, but you're only doing that 2 to 3 times a week.
Right.
We are not just filling macros with garbage here. And even if you don't have a coach, dictate it to yourself, right? Discipline yourself. Say to yourself, after the show, I'm going to allow myself, 2 to 3 times in a week that I can plug in whatever I want. I want a protein bar. I want a Larabar. I want pizza. I want to go have a burger. I want to have pancakes. Do it. But then the rest of the time, you are still pulling from those nutrient-dense foods, and you aren't going to feel as crappy.
Right.
Your weight isn't going to go flying through the roof quite as much because you're not going to be all full of sodium and the additives and the chemicals and the processed, and you're going to feel better.
Yep.
I know that it's hard, and in so many ways after the show is a lot more challenging than going into the show. But the way you have to look at the whole process of all of this, of dieting, of competing, is you have to be disciplined and you have to exercise self-control. And that doesn't get to take a vacation. That doesn't get to come and go. The same discipline and self-control that you had before the show, you have to exercise it the same way after the show.
Right.
You have to understand that you're going to want to eat everything in sight, but also understand that you can't, right? We're adults. You can't just be a petulant child and say, well, I want to eat this.
Right.
Well, you know what? Life doesn't work that way.
Life's not fair. Get a helmet.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. Well, we are actually down to the last question and the last 6 or 7 minutes. So if anybody out there has a question, ping it in. But in the meantime, the last question we had submitted actually goes along the same line for the competition, competitors. And it's a good question asking, if you're a competitor doing multiple shows, how do you handle reverse dieting? The flip side of that is there an ideal amount of time that you should have in between shows to implement reversing properly and getting back into the next show? And we all know that everything's caveated with it depends, but are there general guidelines?
That is so loaded.
So
Yeah.
Because I have clients, getting on stage week after week right now. So my personal preference for a client is to choose a season to compete in and a cluster of shows within a matter of 2-3 weeks of each other, so that I'm not hardcore dieting them for months in between shows, because I think going months in between shows, like doing a show in May and then trying to do another show in August or September, 2 different seasons as far as I'm concerned. I think it's very difficult to calibrate in between those because of, how difficult things can be with trying, wanting to kind of get some of those treat foods back in or whatever the case may be post show. Where I think it's a little bit easier for people to do clusters of shows in a season because it seems to be a little bit easier for people, including myself when I was competing, to go a week or two in between shows and be able to kind of stay on point, and we just kind of keep the diet going. Depending on how long there is in between a show, they may get some couple higher calorie days. But if it's like a week back to back, we may just have to literally go right back into peak week. We may get like a meal post show and then we go right back into peak week again. It depends on the client. I have a client that just did 2 back-to-back peak weeks. She got a meal after the show. She was right back on her peak week the next day. She's going to go 2 weeks in between her next shows. So she got a meal after her show and some higher calories today because she competed yesterday. She gets higher calories today. She's got another show in 2 weeks. So then we're kind of back to not peak week again because that's a week away, but, kind of we have some improvements to make too. So that also depends. So are we trying to kind of get her a little bit leaner between now and the next show? What can I do in between? So it depends on what your goal is in between those shows. My personal preference, so if I were really looking, so beyond that like cluster in a season, would be that a client not compete like in the spring and the fall, compete in spring of 2018 and then maybe the fall of 2019 to give yourself a nice long period of time. But, it depends on how hard they've had to diet, what the situation is. So, but that's my preference as far as like what to do in between shows and how long you should go between shows. How about you, Allison?
Any thoughts on that, Allison?
I agree and I disagree. I think it really depends on the person and how much weight they had to lose and how hard they had to diet. Like if you're somebody who gains 15 to 20 pounds in your off season or your growth season, then your best bet for prep is probably going to be long and slow. And in which case you would want to do it exactly like Tina said, which is to try to do shows closer together. If you're somebody who doesn't gain 15 to 20 pounds, let's say you gain, 5 to 10 or something like that, and you tend to keep it closer. And this is myself too. I tend to have a closer, what the hell am I going to diet for 24 weeks for? I don't got 25 pounds to lose. So then I actually like to see them hit it hard and hit it fast. And you get in and you get out before the body really understands what's going on. You get your weight down, you get yourself on stage, you get your calories back up. I also don't think some people handle back-to-back shows really, really well from a mental standpoint. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, then that has to be taken into consideration. Again, I'm speaking from personal experience. I have done back-to-back shows and it has killed me mentally. And it has killed my body. My body cannot handle that hard dieting for like all those extended weeks. So it really just depends, again, on how much weight you gain, how much weight you have to lose, what kind of person you are. I would say it should be done in either one of two ways. The first being what Tina said, which is that if you have a lot of weight to lose, you diet nice and long and slow so that we aren't losing muscle. You pick a cluster of shows, you do your season, and then you get out. The other way to diet is to hit it hard and fast before your body understands what's going on. And I'm serious, like don't even like dilly-dally around, get your ass in a deficit, get the weight off. If you only have like 5 or 6 pounds to lose, get it off, get on stage, get your calories back up, eat for a while, and then you could maybe do it again. But then I would only say you should be doing like 1 to 2 shows, in like a 12-month span, and then you should be taking a year or 2 off, which is kind of the way I do it. And it's the way I have done it with my clients who don't gain as much weight. My clients who really gain a lot of weight, I do exactly what Tina said, which is we diet nice and long and slow, because bear in mind the purpose of any diet and the purpose of any good coach is to try to maintain and sustain as much lean muscle as we possibly can while we're dieting. Now, granted, some tissue loss is going to occur. It's kind of inevitable, but we want to minimize it as much as possible. So there are really 2 ways to do that. Diet long and slow, hit it and get the heck out. One of the two. You're either doing one of the two.
Hard and fast or long and slow.
Right. Really hard and fast or really long and slow. And so again, it boils down to that individual basis. And I always try to take the psychology into play as well, because I see a lot of clients, I have seen clients break down mentally doing 3, 4, 5 shows back to back. All of a sudden this starts to go. And when this starts to go, all the wheels come off the wagon. Yep. So if they can't handle that, then we have to find some other option here. Or maybe they just do 1 show. You know, you don't have to do 10 shows. Nope. You know, there's no need for that. If you're somebody who gains 15 to 20 pounds in your off season, diet nice and long and slow, do a show, and then be done. Who says you got to do like 10? You know, there's no reason for that if you can't handle it.
Nope.
I can't. I'll be the first person to admit it. I've done it. I did 3 shows this past year, and I was immediately reminded of why I do not do 3 shows. It's like, we are not doing that again. So there's nothing wrong with just dieting and doing 1. But really, if you're dieting down and then you're like, how long do I reverse diet in between shows? Well, if your shows are really close together, you're not reverse dieting. Nope. You don't have the time. You just have to keep going.
Trying to maintain where you are, or if you're trying to get leaner, because if you weren't lean enough in your first show, and then understanding that you're not, you know, if all the judges' feedback was like, oh, you need bigger shoulders, you need to grow, then really there's no point in continuing to try to diet and get on the stage more times, because if all your feedback is you need to grow, and I don't care what anybody tells you, if I hear one more person tell me I'm gonna take, they compete in October, I'm gonna take a little off season, and I'm gonna compete again in May. No, that's not an off season. Not when your goal is to grow, right? I'm gonna compete in October, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to get on stage again in May. Well, for most people, that's not likely to happen unless, like Allison said earlier, you're on a really good cycle of drugs, then maybe, right? But, you know, for most people, and the people I see do that tend to go off the rails, gain 20 pounds, and then they're trying to kill themselves because the body doesn't want to drop the 20 pounds again so quickly, and so it just perpetuates a really bad situation.
Muscle growth is long and slow. And ladies, we are ladies. It is longer and slower for us. And if you're natural, guess what? It's even longer and slower. And if you're over 30, guess what? It's even longer and slower.
And if you've been training more than 3 years and you're over 30 and you're a woman and you're natural, it's never going to happen. No, I'm kidding. It's just going to take a long time. It's going to be
it's long and time. So if you're sitting there going, I gained 20 pounds this off season, and it's all muscle.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. You're lucky if like half of it's muscle. You know, it just
really lucky.
You have to be realistic.
Yep.
Well, I feel like that's a good topic, maybe for our next webinar.
Yeah,
really. I think that would be a good topic. Growth.
Yeah. What's a building season and how do you do it?
Okay.
But for this seminar, that is the end of our time. It's 1:03 or 2:03, I think, in your guys' world. So any last words from Tina, Allison?
I'm good.
No, I thank you everybody for joining us for this webinar. I would actually love it if you guys could send us some feedback. If you want to shoot an email to me or Allison, we'll share it with each other, however you want to get the information to us. I appreciate you guys spending the time with us, and I will be sending out a link to this the recorded version of this for everybody who was here, plus everybody that registered that didn't make it live. So you guys will get private access to it. It's going to be password protected, so I put it out there that I appreciate you not sharing it outside, if you find a way technology-wise to share it outside of the folks that actually registered for it. So any feedback you have, you'll get a copy of the link, and thank you guys for hanging out with us. Super appreciate it. Hopefully you guys got something out of it. And if you have questions after this that we didn't answer, just let us know. Shoot us an email and we'll make sure we get back to you guys. Otherwise, have a great Sunday.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.